Happy Sunday, everyone. Kyle Dixney's, I made his 18 for him, and he was he was going through some of the things he was using WinISD. So WinISD is great because it's free. I don't like it because it sort of, I'm sure not by design. What happens is a lot of guys with OCD tend to pay too much attention to the tiniest of details. And what people don't realize about enclosure building and speaker parameters is that the details don't matter as much as you might think, right? So the first thing you want to stop chasing is the perfect box. There is no perfect box. There is a good balance between efficiency and depth, that sort of thing. You also typically want a little boost in the response, right around no lower than 30, and then typically no higher than about 40 hertz. So if I remember right, the specs on his 18 were the FS were 22 hertz. The QTS was I think 1.4, and then the VAS I think was like right around 6 cubic feet. Okay, so that's the only numbers that you need in order to design an enclosure. The rest of the specs feed into one another to create these numbers. So these are the only ones that really matter or even really care about. And even then, you can still fudge a lot of stuff. So now, what this tells you is that this is your lower limit of what the subwoofer can produce. It cannot produce anything lower than that. Otherwise, it becomes super inefficient. Floppy butthole. So, and I don't even like to go down this low unless you have the space to spare, which is 6 cubic feet, which is pretty big. And so this subwoofer would actually be really good for like a SUV where you have room in the cargo area to make a big box, if you do want to go that low, or like a home theater, like a coffee table, something like that you can go big on, and then do a really large port that's really long. It takes up a lot of volume, so that way you get like next to nothing on the chuffing and the turbulence. So that's what this would be really great for. So, but to go over these basics sort of. So this is the lower limit. It won't go any lower than that. 22 is as low as this will go. Now what happens is when this response, let's say we do a really flat response. It ends up looking like that. So here's our, let's see, probably 3B down point would be, let's make this 22. So that's it'll be nice and flat to 22, and then it starts to come off, and it'll probably be a little, no, it'll be a look like that, 12 dB slope for sealed. So if this is in a 6 cubic foot box, that's what it'll look like. Now, if you're going to do the response, like what you do is you make the box the same size, and you can do this using a program like WinISD. I grew up using Blaubox, which is a DOS program. And you got to use it in somebody had launched, I forget who did it. I get 1,000 emails a day. There's a program that's an emulator that you can load DOS programs or any other small executables, and it'll load it in a window, and you can actually use it on Windows. That's what I recommend. The only downside for Blaubox is that the screensaver, it would go to a screensaver option. It was based on clock cycles. So back when they were using a 33 hertz, even a 66 hertz, megahertz clock, processor, it would take about a minute or two before you'd reach that point. In today's processors, it's almost instant. So I think somebody went in there into the code and then disabled that, which was great. And so that way you can use it as a normal. Now, as a normal program. Now, personally, I know it's fun to experiment with Bandpass, whether it's a dual reflex or I forget what the other one's called. Many people call it a fourth order, but that's a misleading term. Where it's a sealed box playing into a ported box. Bandpass is shit. Bandpass is garbage. Instead of using the driver actively, which is the way you should do it, so that you get correct response, accurate response, whenever you do a bandpass, you're depending on the port that exits into the atmosphere. And that is restricted. Now, it's restricted for a purpose. Just like MB Enclosure was talking about, you put the thumb over the end of the hose, you're going to get a squirt, right? You're going to get a jet. That's called the Venturi effect. And that's going to happen anytime you make the enclosure smaller, or I'm sorry, the opening smaller than the enclosure. So it's going to get a Venturi effect. Now, people sometimes prefer that in very specific applications, but for the most part, I don't recommend it. Real quick, it's mostly because typical, let's see, typical bandpass, like that. So a typical bandpass, this is a sealed box. So you're limited to whatever the FS of the driver is. And then typically people make this box too small. They don't even make it the VAS so that they can achieve the low end limit. So again, this is, first of all, even if you did make this 6 cubic foot, so you can get down to 20 hertz, this is a big box and you're wasting your time. You might as well just cut this part off and just use it as a sealed box and you'll do much better. You'll get a better bass response, a larger pass band. Again, the reason why this is called bandpass is because it's a filter, a 12 dB acoustic filter on the top end, and then on the low end, it just rolls off 12 dB because this is a sealed box. So you're going to get that response, which is okay, which is fine. It's whatever. Again, your lower limit is 22 hertz. But back to what I was talking about with the Porty Box, what I would recommend on this one is actually you could go a little bit smaller, right around, I would say 4.5 to 5 cubic foot. And then what you do is you port it at 33 hertz. I like that a lot. And then what you're going to end up getting is a boost in response. So let's see, let's go down here. Let's say this is 30. This is 35. So what you're going to end up getting is a kind of a boost, and then it's going to come down early like that. So you're going to get a free boost there just from porting it early. So if you take it, if this was a piece of string and you were squishing it, this is what you're going to get. And this is what you want to look for. This is free bass that you don't have to equalize. It's not going to cost you any more power, and it comes out from the port. So sometimes this ends up being a little bit like that, and then it comes up like that. Anyways, you go, well, that's not flat, Patrick. I want a flat response. Actually, you don't. Most people like a boost in the low end, like that, and then in the high end. And that is what's known as the punch EQ by John France. That's what it is. So it has I think it was a peak at either 12K or 16K. I think it was 12K. And then this is at 45. That's it. It was an EQ circuit that John France had come up with, or actually John France, I forget the story if he discovered it or I think he came up with a better application for it. And I think that's what John France did. So, and he was at Rockford at the time. So, but, and then you see other versions. I think when Bernie left Rockford and went to make Orion and all that stuff with what's his name? Oh God. Dick LeMay. Well, Bernie did PPI with Dick LeMay, but they came up with their own EQ circuit, and you saw that later on in the I think the XTR. I forget which version. It was like probably version 2, version 3. It's just a little push button, and then it would just activate this. So that way it would work even if you had a high pass crossover, where this was going like that. So it would just be for high pass. You'd still get the boost at 12K, and then if you did a low pass, you'd still get the boost at 45. So, but yeah, this is what you want as far as enclosures go. For normal, for a car, I would do 4.5 to 5, and you can run it through the simulator to see if, you know, where you want this. And again, this is good. You don't want flat. And then what you want to do is then if you have a, let's see, let's go up. Then if you have a bass boost, which is typically at 45 hertz, that's where you can adjust this. And you want to go like say plus 3, maybe plus 6, if you really want to get up, and then it'll go up all the way. But it'll be flat like that, and then it'll drop off 24 dB per octave, which is 4th order in a regular ported box. So, which is fine because nobody gives a shit after 30 hertz anyway, because there's no music down there. There's only explosions, and most people are not listening to explosions in a car, so it doesn't matter. And even if you are listening to explosives in a car, like in movies and things like that, it does a better job with tactile transducers, which is bass shakers. Those do a better job. And if you haven't tried them, I highly suggest that you try them because they're really rad. And they'll trick your brain into thinking that there's a subwoofer in the vehicle or in the living room, because they definitely fooled me. But I think that was it. But the purpose of this video is basically to show you that you don't need a program like WinISD in order to tell you how to do speaker prediction, how to do response prediction for your enclosure, and how to decide how big you need to be and what frequency you need to port. All the boxes are going to be about the same. You're gonna tune anywhere from 32 to about 36. The only time this changes is when you use a 10-inch woofer or an 8-inch woofer or something smaller. Then you want to tune a little bit higher, about 40, 45, just because that's where it's most efficient. Most 8s don't play below 40 hertz. Most don't play around 45, especially when you get those high BL woofers with a stiff suspension that you want to handle 400 or 500 watts, which is dumb because you want the suspension to be soft and you want that coil to be heavy. That's what enables it to play below that. You get a little. So I'm getting ready to make a bunch. I shouldn't say a bunch, but I'm getting ready to make 4 of those, which is a clone of the Sunfire True 8 subwoofer. It's my version of it. It's a little quad. Or no, we're doing a triple stack version of it with a really heavy copper coil. And so I want to show you what it's going to respond to, and I'll do the TL small parameters on it to show you what it's going to end up looking like, and then you can do box prediction. So again, back to what I was talking about, you don't need to go down to 22 hertz. So when you tune up higher, what happens is the response is going to get more efficient near the tuning frequency. The last thing I wanted to cover was high BL woofers. So typically high BL woofers will have a QTS of 0.5 or higher. And that all the QTS determines is what kind of box it will be best suited in. Now, typically if you have a QTS of lower than 0.5, that they recommend you go into a sealed box. Well, what happens also with that is typically this will go up. So, or it will be up. It will be much larger. The other day I was looking at an old car audio magazine, and it was like a 12-inch woofer with a VAS of like 6 cubic feet. So then you got to put this 12-inch woofer in a 6 cubic foot box just to get it to play to, and then whatever the FS was. And I think the FS was right around, I think 27 hertz or something like that. So that gets very big. So it's easier, and it's not that they recommend a sealed box for it. It's just that it makes it easier so your box size isn't so large. And so I think what you can do with a subwoofer like that, which is again a 12-inch with a FS of 27 hertz, a QTS of say 0.4 or 0.3, and then a VAS of let's say 6 cubic feet. What you can do is put it in a really small box, which is like say 2 cubic foot, which is more reasonable, and then it's sealed. And then what you do is this would actually be different. So let me start over here. So your response ends up being like that, real sort of shallow. Let's say this is 20 hertz, 25, and then this is 30. And then so then what you do is, and actually maybe even shorter than that, more shallow like that. And then what you do is you use your bass boost. So this is where it's great. Typically you don't want to use your bass boost, which is just an equalizer of more than plus 12 in a sealed box, and then more than about plus 6, maybe 8 in a ported box. Just because it starts to act weird. What was it? Yeah, so that's what you do, and that's what if you go back and look at the specs and the technology that Kicker was talking about Soliberic, that's all they did. They would just put it in a sealed box and then equalize the shit out of it. A lot of guys were fans of the JL Audio 18 W6. Same thing. You could put an 18 in 4 cubic foot box, and then they would just say add bass boost at around 40 hertz, 45 hertz. And it sounds great, and it does. So that's the other way to get around it, is to just use an equalizer. Now, the other thing I've been sort of trying to get people to understand about what a bandpass box is. A bandpass box is simply a physical acoustic filter, or I should say an acoustic equalizer. If you're using it to boost frequencies, if you're looking to get, you know, that the thing that the computer program shows you, something like that, or even like this, which it's never like this, it's more like this. You go, oh, it's got a really flat pass band. Well, this is typically only about 40 hertz, and then this is whatever you cut it off at, say 120 hertz. So this is all bullshit anyway, because it's not getting anything below 40 hertz, which is where the real low bass is. So this is, when you do tune it like that to be real peaky, like that, let's say it's like that, that's in a higher bass thing. Remember, your sealed box can only play down to whatever your VAS is. So if this thing is purposely small in the first place, you're going to have a tough time getting low bass out of it because it's too small. The other thing is the bandpass. Let's say it is real sharp, or you do whatever. There you go. So now you do a dual vented, which is dual reflex. You can also do it like this, like this. So you can also do it like that. That's the other way to do it. Yeah, this is actually something else. I forget what this is. But again, this is covered in the loudspeaker cookbook. This is actually a dual reflex bandpass box. And both of these suck because they end up distorting it. But anyways, it's hard to talk you guys out of it because you guys spend all that time and money building it, and then you're like, well, see, it works. And I'm like, yeah, but if you had tested it A and B to just a regular sealed box that's been equalized, or even just a ported box, you would have realized that you could have built the same thing, the same response, the same depth, you know, and got the same performance out of a box that's smaller, right? Which would have saved space, which would have made more room for whatever, people to climb in and do hair tricks and things like that. And, you know, you can look at all this and say, well, Patrick, you're full of shit, blah, blah, blah. You sound as confusing as MB enclosures, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Number one, I don't give a shit because I already studied this. I already know this. Number two, don't take my word for it. Go to RATS, R-A-T-S, which is Rockford Audio, I forget what it is, technical system, whatever it is. RATS is the Rockford Acoustic Enclosure program. Where you can look and say, well, what is 2 P3s going to sound like in a Tahoe? So Wayne Connolly there at Rockford had taken the time, and we're talking about like years of research and years of trial and error and recording of, you know, what the responses look like and on very specific drivers. And so what's great about that technology is, number one, it's going to show you what prediction is in a certain vehicle. Wayne Harris talked about this way back when he had his program that was popular, his software. I forget what it's called, TermLab, that's what it's called. Wayne was talking about, like, he says, yes, you can predict it down to whether or not there's a passenger in the vehicle. It's going to change the shape, and technically it does. But is it really that, you know, like, are you really going to hear a difference? And Wayne's like, you don't really want to get into that far of detail because then, you know, like what if you have groceries and a baby stroller in the trunk, you know, and then people obsess about that. And they're like, sorry, babe, can't put the baby stroller and the groceries in the trunk because of my bass. And guys get like that. They get real possessive and real weird. And it's just, again, it's a computer program, and you want to leave all your options available on the table so that you can get the most accurate information. Now, how you interpret that information is up to you. And how you use that and how you tweak it and things like that is up to you. So don't be obsessive compulsive. Don't sit there and, you know, obsess over the specs. And you're like, oh, I got to have specs. They're all going to perform about the same. You know, 18s for the most part all perform pretty well in anywhere from 6 to 8 cubic feet. Again, it depends on what your low frequency thing is. And if you want to have your own TSPs, buy the little woofer tester. I bought the woofer tester 3 back in, what, like 05? It was $100 then. It's $100 now, and you even get the new version. So I have to have a dedicated XP machine just to run mine. So buy it if you're that obsessed about it. And what you're going to end up finding out is all this information that I've already absorbed, I've already digested, and already come up with creative ways to apply it, are going to be these same results that you're going to get. So, but some of you guys, I know you only learn through doing, and you only learn the hard way, and that's fine. For the rest of you, if you're going to deal with me, please trust me. Please trust and know that I know what I'm talking about, and I know that I'm saying, and take my recommendations. I mean, you took a risk on buying something from me. Take the next risk. I'm not asking you to raw dog me, okay? I'm just saying take a risk on my years of experience, that I know what the fuck I'm talking about, and I want to get you the best results you can. Now, if you're going to be fucking around with SPL, this is a different game, because you don't care about good sound. You don't. You care about numbers. And these two things can produce pretty good numbers. That's what you want, is you want a Venturi effect. You want to take all this volume, all this displacement that it's creating, and then focus it down into a jet. And then that jet is what it gives you high SPL. Right? But again, that's a different game. And it still doesn't do good. I still think you can do better in just a regular ported box. That was the last thing I wanted to cover, was QTS. Typically a high BL driver is going to have a higher QTS. This one is a little high. Again, high is relative. The way that it looks on the DATs or the woofer tester 3 is it'll be a really small bump in the, which I still don't quite know the relationship to that, of how a small bump is a high QTS. Again, it goes into, I guess, how you're describing it. So, anyways, typically what happens is when a woofer has a high BL, high motor force, very large magnet, very powerful, is they get really peaky at the resonant frequency. And if you're going to manipulate that into a ported box, it's going to get very peaky at whatever frequency you're going to tune the enclosure to. Okay, so let me go over that again. A high BL woofer, let's take a really high BL woofer like the TC Sounds TC5200. Okay, that's a really high BL woofer. And if you look at it, and I'll put a link to it in the description, where you can run the specs of it through WinISD, through whatever, and you can see what I'm talking about, which is that if you tune the box to, say, the resonant frequency, let's say it's 30 hertz, you're going to get a huge peak. And then what you do is when you start scooting that up, and you go, well, let's tune it 36, let's tune it 40, let's tune it 50, you're going to get a really big peak. And that's what's really good about those high BL drivers. And now the downside of that is typically when you do that to like an 8 or a 10, they call it a fart machine, because it only plays one note, or a one note wonder. And that's because it's really high BL, and the peak is so high that it dominates the rest of the scene. You can't hear anything else because it's so sensitive at that one frequency. And typically those 8s are going to be right here, 40, 45 hertz. And so that's why they call it a one note wonder, or a fart machine. And you get that from having a very stiff suspension and a very, very powerful motor. That's how you get that. So, and then again, your FS is not very high as well. Now, again, for SPL, for getting high numbers, again, I really think they should just do a standardized test at, like, say, 40 hertz. That's where I think they should do. So that way you get rid of all that cheating. So, but if you want to do SPL, again, here's the magic formula for SPL. You want a woofer. Well, first of all, you find your cabin frequency. So you got your cabin FS. So that's the fundamental system frequency of your cabin. Most cabins, the area of your car, the volume inside your car, I've seen them typically about 50 to about maybe 56 hertz. Okay, so find out what your cabin FS is, and the way that you do that is if you can use an RTA, or if you do it old school, you can do it with a SPL meter, like the Radio Shack one. You do it at low levels, and you sit there and plot the dots, and then you can see where your FS is in your vehicle. And you want to just use a standard ported, or not a ported box, like a sealed box, and like a single 15, something like that. And it'll show you there'll be a peak response, this is also known as your cabin gain. It'll be a peak response within whatever that frequency is. So once you find out your frequency, let's say it's 55. You're like, okay, 55 is the number I got to aim for. So then what you want to do is you get a woofer, make a woofer that has an FS of around 55 hertz. right? That's the second step. And then the third step is to create an enclosure tuned to, that's right, 55 hertz. So then at 55 hertz, your frequency response, your sensitivity response is way up there. It's really peaky. It's really super efficient. Your vehicle is going to be super efficient at that one frequency. Now, find out what the impedance is at 55 hertz. Now, if your impedance is, let's say, 13 ohms, that's where you can cheat. That's where, what do you guys call it? Because I don't even think about it, because you guys are, it's like you're the dumbest smart people I've ever met. What do you call that? Box rise, impedance rise. Okay, that's what impedance rise is. So once you know at 55 hertz that you're hitting 13 ohms, then you can load it up with, 8, 10, 12, or whatever to get it down to whatever, 0.5 or whatever your amp is stable to, and run it that way. Now, if you run it on anything outside of that 55 hertz, you're going to have fucking problems, and your amp is going to see something different than that 13 ohms. And then that's when the fires start and all that other shit. So again, you can't have SPL and SQ. It doesn't exist. If you really want to be dedicated to SPL, you have to do these three things. 1, 2, 3. If you want SQ, then that's the rest of everything else. Now, if you just want a loud SQ system that plays really awesome to 30 hertz, then just follow this formula of being reasonable. And then, the more displacement that you want, you need more cone area and more power and more electricity and all that other stuff. So, but that's my Sunday morning rant about this stuff. I wanted to do a Sunday sermon about some other stuff that is more valuable than this. This is all bullshit. So, because this helps you solve a tiny little problem. I want to help you solve bigger problems. But anyways, I love you guys. I'll talk to you more later today. I'm doing some more videos.